So, Professor Methuen, in 2025 there's going to be the commemoration of the 1700th anniversary of an ancient Christian gathering called the Council of Nicaea.
Mm-hmm.
What was the Council of Nicaea and why is it important to the Church?
So the Council of Nicaea was a gathering of the Christian bishops, 318 bishops probably, called by the Emperor Constantine to try to find some unity in the Church. So Constantine had converted to Christianity. He probably had a Christian mother, so he'd probably grown up with Christianity, which was at that time a religion that was not legal in the empire. So being a Christian was quite a complicated thing before Constantine. And then when Constantine becomes emperor, for various reasons, he decides that actually Christianity might be on his, or the Christian God might be on his side. And then he starts to get really concerned about the lack of unity amongst Christians. And so the Council of Nicaea is partly called to help Constantine establish a unity amongst Christians. And the reason it's important is because it marks that shift of Christianity, the point at which Christianity becomes a legal religion in the empire. So it marks a point at which Christianity goes from being a persecuted religion and a religion very much on the sidelines to actually having an official status. And in lots of ways, the Council of Nicaea and that whole period at the beginning of the 4th century sets up Christianity, or sets up what's going to become European Christendom. So without the Council of Nicaea, we might not have had European Christendom, and the whole of the European history would have been different.
There are some people who would say that with the Council of Nicaea, you found a collaboration between the church and the state, which was very unhealthy to Christian witness.
Yeah, and that's an argument that was made at the time, that people said it's a sellout, that the church is sold out, that the church ought to be a persecuted minority. And there's probably some truth in that. I mean, the church had then, or church structures then had to adapt themselves to being legal. And Christian priests and Christian clergy and Christian bishops especially then got some quite special, they had a particular status within the empire. It's one of those great what-ifs of history. I mean, I think if Christianity hadn't become legal, it may have been a sellout, but it saved its life. So I'm not sure we would have had Christianity in quite the same way as such a key part of, particularly of Western European or of European culture, if it hadn't been for Constantine.
You said that before the Council of Nicaea there was a lot of divisions among Christians, and the Council of Nicaea helped to bring them together. But if you look around the world today, you see many different kinds of churches, some of which exist harmoniously with each other, some of which have got very different points of view. So have we really moved on that much in 1700 years?
I mean, I don't think the Council of Nicaea actually achieved unity. I mean, in some ways, the Council of Nicaea is the first time where you can actually see different Christian groups breaking off because of those who didn't accept Nicene Christianity, had to go and find new ways of being and new places of being. Yeah, that's a complicated question, I would say. It's human. I mean, the people were arguing about Christianity. You can see in the Acts of the Apostles that people were arguing about different forms of Christianity, or in Paul's letters. So in some ways, that kind of existential way of being and of not agreeing with each other hasn't changed. I think one of the big shifts in Western Christianity, and this is different in the Orthodox churches, but one of the big shifts in Western Christianity is the coming of the Reformation, and that's where you really start to see fragmentation. I wouldn't want to say that the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages in Europe was uniform, but it did have a certain unity to it. And with the coming of the Protestant Reformation, you start to get much smaller groupings of groups, often of churches, often nationally focused or territorially focused.
You're a member of the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches, and the Faith and Order Commission exists to bring churches into dialogue and seek to overcome their divisions. The World Council of Churches hopes to, or is to, mark 2025 with what's called a World Conference on Faith and Order. What do you think, what do you hope this conference will achieve, and where do you think it will take divided Christian churches?
I think what it might achieve is bringing people together again to have a conversation. I think the experience of actually coming together and talking together about faith is often something that helps people to recognise that their differences can be relativised to some extent. I mean, this is the 6th of the World Conferences on Faith and Order. The first one was in 1927. I think they had great hopes for that issue, sort of bringing in a new Christendom and a new sense of belonging together. I think we've come a long way in the last 100 years. I think the way that we can talk together, the way that we can pray together, would have been unthinkable in the 1920s. So in a sense, what we're doing is another step on a very long process of rediscovering each other. I don't think it's going to be the final answer.
And the last question, if you were asked to describe Nicaea and why it's important to a Christian teenager, what would you say?
I think if it's a Christian teenager, I think one of the things that Nicaea does is to produce the Nicene Creed, and for many churches that's a kind of badge of membership. It's one of the ways that we say we belong. So I would say that it helps us to remember who we are. But I might go back to what I've just said to say, actually, if you're a Christian teenager in Western Europe, then actually Nicaea shapes your history. And if you're a Christian teenager anywhere else in the world, then you probably wouldn't be a Christian if it weren't for Nicaea, probably.
One last question. What do you think Nicaea can say to people in society around us who don't belong to churches?
So I think Nicaea is at the time it was seen as really helping people to grapple with the ultimate questions. I think that's quite hard for us to get our heads around now, because we tend to see the Nicene Creed as a bit of a philosophical construct. But we need to remember that philosophy at that time was about ways of life. And so the Nicene Creed was very much about discussing how people lived their lives. And that's still a question that we need to ask today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.